everyone, my name is Mr. Francy and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Okay, so today I'm doing my reading vlog covering all the books that I read between the 2nd and the 8th of July 2023. My word. So last time we caught up, things were very different. I was discussing a couple of books that I'd already discussed in my monthly wrap. Didn't even know if my reading vlog was worth it, but I hadn't stopped any reading vlogs from happening and didn't want to give up at that point. Speaking of giving up, I was seriously considering DNFing the book I was currently reading. What a turnaround and week can bring. So let's call it what you want up on the screen. This is the book that if you missed my last reading vlog that I was at that time considering DNFing. I did not DNF this book, and I don't blame you if you thought that I was going to, because I had myself convinced that I was going to DNF the book, but I gave it another go. I kept going, and you know what? It actually got better as time went along. So I finished this book. The stats for the book is it's a YA contemporary by Bridget Kemmerer, and I gave it a total of 4 stars. So the premise of this book is that Rob's dad was caught embezzling funds from half the town, and everyone at school blames him. Megan is a typical overachiever who cheated on her exams. When Rob and Megan are paired together for a calculus project, they're both reluctant to let anyone through the walls they've built. But when Megan learns of Rob's plan to fix the damage caused by his father, it could ruin more than their fragile new friendship. So, as I said, I actually nearly DNF'd this book. Why? Megan. Oh my gosh, she annoyed me so much at the beginning. This book is dual perspective, so we follow both Rob and Megan in alternating chapters. Megan's first 7 chapters had at least one moment where she did something or thought something that made no sense to me whatsoever. So she's built up to be this incredibly intelligent girl, and one example of annoyance was when she decided Rob must be to blame for what his father did. Why? Because everyone else in school thinks so? I understand there's such a thing as mob mentality at high school, but for a character as intelligent as Megan, you would think that she wouldn't necessarily go along with it, and that raised a lot of questions for me. Rob, on the other hand, I loved as a character. In the past, he was a popular boy, but this whole thing his dad did made him become a social pariah overnight. Because of this, we see Rob at his most humble, and that made him incredibly endearing. The book definitely improves in the second half, which is why it got the 4 stars it did. It's definitely a book that I do encourage you to read, but it's at the same time a book that you need to push yourself to continue reading because it gets better as you go along. So if you're someone who picks up this book and you start struggling with Megan's perspective like I did, just keep going. Trust me, once you get past her 7th chapter, so chapter 14, her 7th one, it does get a whole lot better, and the book was fantastic. Look, I picked up Bridget Kemmerer's first fantasy book. Yes, Bridget Kemmerer, I was right. Bridget Kemmerer's first fantasy book, and I didn't like it, but I did also read Letters to the Lost and More Than We Can Tell by her, and I loved both of them. Letters to the Lost, to me, to this day, is one of the absolute best chef's kiss books I've ever read. And so when I found out that Bridget Kemmerer had released another contemporary that I hadn't read, I definitely wanted to read this. This book's actually been sitting on my TBR shelf for a while now. So I'm really happy I finally got to it. Despite its slow start, it still ended up receiving 4 stars and deserving all of the stars that it did receive. So I do recommend this one if you're looking for a good contemporary. And if you're looking for good contemporaries, I recommend any Bridget Kemmerer contemporary because I just think she's an amazing contemporary author. 4 stars from me. So the next book that I picked up was this book, Crossed by Ali Condi. This is book number 2 in the Matched trilogy, I believe. Yes, trilogy. It is a YA dystopian series, and for book 2, I gave it 4 stars. So in this dystopian world, we are following a woman by the name of Kesha, who is I mean, if you haven't read a dystopian before, generally dystopian books are characterized by their fabulous world building. We're in a world, usually it's set in the future, that is being ruled over by a tyrant who puts into place a number of laws and rules that make it look like a horrible world to live in. So it's the complete opposite to a utopian, hence why it's called a dystopian series. So in this particular situation, there is a society that rules this world, and the society rules each and every single thing that everyone in this particular world or area, I should say, I'm saying world for the sake of world building, but this area does, including, if we want to be specific, what they eat, when they can eat it, and how much of the food they're allowed to receive. And it is down to each individual. It's not a thing of, oh, I just think you should have less. No, this society has all the statistics on every single person in their area. And so they calculate everything down to, okay, their perfect time of day to eat would be this time. They're only going to eat this because it's going to be the best thing for them. The portion size will be this because that is what works for them. So everything is incredibly specifically catered for, but catered for in a horrible way because there's no real freedom in the world, but catered for each individual. In the first book, Kesha ends up going through her matching ceremony. So when you turn a certain age, you can put yourself into the matching pool and be matched with someone in the greater area as a whole. There are many districts in the area, and usually you are matched with someone from a different district. But Kesha ends up not only getting matched with someone from her district, but her best friend, who they both walked in to the matching ceremony together, having prepared together for their individual matches, only to be matched together. When Kesha goes back home, she's looking at her device, which I kind of think of as looking like an iPad. And on the device, she has her match there, her best friend in front of her, but momentarily her match disappears and is replaced by someone else. That someone else is someone she knows who is a social pariah of the world. Then that person disappears and her original match comes back, but Kesha believes there is more going on than meets the eye. So she sets out to find out what the heck is going on here. So in book 2, chasing down an uncertain future, Kesha makes her way to the outer provinces in pursuit of Kai, okay, there's a lot I can say here, but I'm realizing that a lot of this is actually a spoiler. So I'll just say, yeah, she goes on a journey to try and find out something that happened she goes on a journey picking up after something went down at the end of book 1, to try and find out who, what, where, when, why. So much I can say, but if I continue reading this premise, I'm going to spoil so much, so I won't. I'll just tell you my thoughts and feelings. Honestly, the first half was very dull for me. I mean, I get what Condi was doing and why she was doing what it was that she was doing, but the problem is that we deal with the traveling/questing trope for the first half of the book, which, if you know me, is my own personal least favorite trope. In saying that, it picked up in the second half, reminding me why I fell in love with book 1. I'm intrigued to see how Condi concludes the series in book 3. It really could go one of two ways. It will either be amazing or a downward spiral, but all in all for me, it hinges on that final book. But I gave this one 4 stars. As I said, I don't like the traveling/questing trope, so if you're going to give me a traveling/questing trope and not keep me entertained while we are traveling and questing, I will take it out on my star rating. That's just how it is for me because it doesn't work for me. And that came up in the first half, but the second half was really good. And there's only 1 book left. I am intrigued to pick it up, but as I say, that final book will be make or break for me. So we will see how we go. So the next book that I picked up, and I'll reiterate that again, picked up, was this book, Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. Okay. This is an adult thriller, and I made it through chapter 1 and then I DNF'd. It just wasn't working for me for so many reasons. I wanted it to because it's a thriller. I've just come off an amazing thriller month in June and I wanted to keep going with my thrillers. So I just placed this one on there because I'd reached out to people who had said to me, this is a really good one, and it just wasn't working for me. So what I did to give it another chance was I found out this was released as a movie, and I did some research on the premise of the movie because I went into this book, as I always do with every book, blind. And the more I was reading of the premise, the more I thought, oh my goodness, no, this is not for me. Even the movie is not for me. So it just, yeah, it just didn't work. So I ended up DNFing this book, which is sad because it's a thriller and I want to read more thrillers. But if a book is not going to work for me, why push yourself to read something you're not enjoying? That is the best and fastest way to lose interest in reading. So I DNF'd. In its place, I picked up this book, which is Bridge Over Troubled Dreams by Delta Goodrem. So, for those of you who don't know, Delta Goodrem is an Australian singer-songwriter. She started her career off on a hit TV show in Australia called Neighbours, where she was playing the role of a singer. In real life, she was a singer, and in the show, she ended up writing a song. I didn't watch the show, but I know about it because I like Delta. From what I heard, she wrote a song, her character did, in the show, sung the song in the show, and then released that as her first single, which was either Born to Try or Innocent Eyes, one of the two. Anyway, Delta went on to have a very successful career, releasing multiple albums and traveled the world and stuff like that. And yeah, so I had followed Delta for a very long time in childhood, and but she'd never released a book. And then she released this one. And what this book is something fantastic. And I'd love to know if other artists have done this as well. It's not exactly a memoir. It's more of a discussion of how she came to write each track on her latest album called Bridge Over Troubled Dreams. Now, the funny thing is, for someone who absolutely loved her growing up, I didn't even know that she'd released an album called Bridge Over Troubled Dreams. But anyway, that's not the point. So in this book, chapter by chapter, we go through each track on that album, and she discusses where the inspiration came from, how she wrote it, and things like that, what the words mean to her, stuff like that, which I thought was really fantastic. And if you know of any other singer-songwriters who write their own songs, because Delta's always written her own lyrics with every album that she's released, who's released a book like this, please let me know, because I found it to be incredibly intriguing. I listened to the audiobook on Audible. It was 1.5 hours long on one-time speed, and it was just so interesting. Every chapter we open up getting about 10 seconds worth, a little 10-second clip of the song, and then she goes into, how I was inspired to write the song, what these words mean to me, and if there is any backstory to anything to do with the track. It was just incredibly intriguing. She has not released a memoir before, but I hope she does, because I'd like to read it. But really, really happy to own the book and was really happy reading it. So, okay. Is there anything else I need to add to that? It's going off the cuff there, which was interesting. So as I said, I'd just come off DNFing that other book and wanted a nice memoir, and then came across this. I'd always loved her, but somehow the album, as I said, completely slipped my notice. This book, though, was everything you could want from Delta regarding an album and the thought process behind it. I think she should go back to every album she's done and release more books. My only con was it's short, and I really did wish for more, but otherwise a great book from a great artist. And I gave this book 4.5 stars. It's really tough to categorize. What did Goodreads call this? Because it's not a memoir. It is called, okay, I'll tell you exactly what it's called. According to Goodreads, it's a non-fiction music biography audiobook memoir. Okay. I don't know. Is it a memoir of the album? It's not a memoir of her life, although what she wanted to do, and I'll quickly say this because we still have time. What she wanted to do with this album was go specifically, because she's released a number of albums, was to go back through her life, through all the other albums that she'd released, and try and put a track onto this album for each different moment of her life. So she basically wanted to chronicle her life in this album. And she normally does that anyway. I mean, in every album that she'd released up to that point that I'd listened to, it kind of chronicles moments of her life for the past year or two, depending on how long it's been between albums anyway. But with this one, she wanted to go back throughout her entire life from start to end. So the album in a way is kind of like a memoir, and the book is about the album. So I guess if you look at it that way, I guess you could take it as a memoir, but it's more a memoir of the album rather than a memoir of her personally. But anyway, I gave it 4.5 stars. So now to my current read, and I'm currently reading this book, Pretties by Scott Westerfeld, which is book number 2 in the, I believe it's called Uglies? Yes, Uglies Quartet. Oh my goodness. Can I just say, before I say anything at all about the contents within the book, how much of a struggle it was for me to get the book. The image that you've been seeing up on the screen hasn't been the edition of the book that I own, but that's okay. What you're seeing on the screen is an image of the book that I'm reading, just not my edition. The edition that I own is apparently a 2023 release of this series, and each book has a flower on it. And so I got that edition for book 1 for Uglies because it was the only edition that was available for me to purchase. And then with this book, book 2, Pretties, oh my goodness, this was so hard to get. So I ordered this book. It wasn't available. It had been published, but it wasn't in stock. So I was told that I would receive an email or something like that once they had a delivery date for me once it was back in stock, but that never happened. And then apparently they went to charge me and there was an issue with my card or whatever, but letting that go. I then went back to the website when I found out about that so I could update details and whatever, and found out that they were wanting to charge me the original price that I was quoted, where they had docked the price for the new set of these editions that had come in by $5, which is a massive difference. So I cancelled my original ordered it through this one and got it. And then a couple of days later, already ordered the next book in the series because I didn't want to have to go through this again. But anyway, now let's talk about the book, because I do love this edition. Whilst the editions with the face on them I think are okay, and the other edition looks like they all have black backgrounds with like a, I don't know, like a fluoro color on each book, like pink and yellow and orange and whatever. I just think these editions are really gorgeous with the flowers and the kind of like smashed shards of glass. It truly reflects the series. But anyway, let's talk about the book, shall we? Okay, so there's not a lot I can say because it's book 2 in the series, but the basic setup for this series is that we follow a girl by the name of Tally, who in this world, when you turn a certain age, which I think is 16, if memory serves correctly, but when you turn a certain age, you are prettified. You go through an operation to make you look pretty. And the reason for this is because it's set in the future, and scientists had discovered that in the past, people were treated based on how they looked. So a good looking person would get better career opportunities because of how they look. So wanting to even out the field, I guess, if you will, they decided that once everyone turns 16, they go through an operation that makes them look pretty. And so therefore, when it comes to any prospect, from moving forward from that age, the judgment of them will not be made on their looks, but will rather be made on something else, such as intelligence, for example. And so from that angle, I do appreciate it. I think it would be very rough to live in a situation where you have to go through this massive surgery at a young age just to look pretty, because that's what those in power say you need to do. But I understand where they're coming from, in that they're trying to level out the playing field and say, no one's going to get an advantage just because of how they look. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so in the first book, there's not a lot I can say. Okay, there's something I want to say that might be deemed as a spoiler, so I'm going to put a spoiler tag on the screen, but I need to say this for you to understand the spoiler-free thing that I'm going to say about this book. So we'll put the tag on the screen, but know that I'm not going into major spoilers. It just might be deemed as a spoiler. Okay, spoiler tag on the screen. I'm going to say it now. So in book 1, Tally gets to that day when she's going to have this surgery and she runs away and doesn't have the surgery. What annoys me about this is because Tally ends up going somewhere else where these people who are totally against the operation happening have formed their own little, I guess you could say, outsiders society, and she goes and lives with them. Look, that's fine, but it annoyed me because I thrive on world building when it comes to dystopians. And if you're setting me up with this world being that everyone is made to be pretty and then things move forward from there, if our protagonist isn't going to be made pretty and instead runs away, we don't get the world building of that pretty world. And that annoyed me. What I appreciated though was with her running away and going to these outsiders, it expands upon the world building for the things we may not have seen had she been made pretty. But it annoyed me because I wanted to see at a basic level what the heck was going on, and we couldn't see that. So in book one, we don't see that at all. By the end of book one, I won't spoil what happens, but by the end of book one, Tally is going to be made pretty. What annoys me, therefore, with this book, with Pretties, is we open up this book and she already is pretty and has been for a while. And that annoys me because I wanted to see her go through that journey. To me, it was integral. There was so much build up in book number one as to the effects being made pretty has on each individual. And so to have her being made pretty and she's been pretty for a while and now we're in book two and we've missed all of this annoys me. I even went back to see if there was like a novella between book one and book two to see if I could read that and that was going to explain to me, but there wasn't. So I don't understand Scott Westerfeld leading us to this big moment and then just completely jumping over the moment. Have you ever had that with books? It just annoys me when we have time jumps, even if they're small time jumps. When a time jump occurs and we miss a significant moment that we're building up to, it feels like a massive letdown for me, because why are we leading up to something that we're not going to experience? But anyway, in saying that, we're now in Prettyville and we're experiencing Prettyville, and all I can say is Prettyville isn't all that it's made out to be, which, surprise, surprise, being a dystopian world. But it's been really interesting and I've been enjoying my time with it so far, so we will continue on and see how things go. I'm currently at page 240. I think I've got about 2 hours left of the audiobook of this one, and then once I've finished this, I'll be halfway through the quartet. So let's look forward to my plans for this week. Okay, so I'm actually, according to my monthly schedule, I'm actually ahead of where I need to be. So my goal actually was to finish Pretties on Wednesday of this coming week. Look, that may happen. It may be that it takes me that long because of work or whatever. But if I finish before then I'm way ahead of my schedule. But after finishing Pretties, I plan to pick up this book, The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, an author I did not know about until last month, and I am now praising his name as the man who is responsible for getting me back into loving thrillers. So I read The Silent Patient last month, and it blew me away. And from what you all have been saying to me, those of you who have read The Silent Patient and The Maidens, you liked The Silent Patient, but you found The Maidens to be so much better. I gave The Silent Patient an overwhelming 5 stars. I made the Silent Patient something that I can't say because it's coming up in an upcoming video. But anyway, I really loved The Silent Patient. And so if The Maidens is better, oh my goodness, I don't know how Alex Michaelides can do better than he did in the other book. But that's my next book, and I'm really, really excited to get into this one. And then speaking of really excited, when I finish The Maidens, I get to pick up a book that's been, I can't say it's been a year in the making, but my goodness, it's probably been a good 6-7 months for me. I get to pick up the next Amish candy shop. Let's put Blueberry Blunder up on the screen. Oh my goodness me. I started reading Amish Candy Shop last year and I fell in love with it. Not only did I read every single main book in the series, but I also read the novellas. It is a fantastic series, and I've been waiting for Blueberry Blunder. So after I finish The Maidens, I will finally get to read that one. So very, very excited to get to that one as well. I don't think that I'll have time to read more than Pretty's The Maidens and Blueberry Blunder, so I won't say any others. And if I read something else, then you'll find out about that when I do. But that is it for this week's reading vlog. How was your reading week last week? Let me know in the comments section below. But until next time, that is where I am going to leave it. I hope you're enjoying your reading, because you know, we can all have off weeks. I had an off week last week, and if you were listening to the reading vlog last week, I'm sure you could tell I had an off week last week, but I had a great week this week. So only time will tell how things are going to be next week. But you know what? That is all part of what makes life fun, the unpredictability of it all. We don't know how things are going to go until we live that week. So let's see how things do turn out. But in the meantime, as always, I'm going to let you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind and love one another, and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, happy reading. Bye everyone.